Now, during this PERM or labor certification stage, the sponsoring company, the sponsoring employer, must take certain steps to attempt to determine whether or not there are qualified U.S. workers. So it's required that they recruit and see who responds. If no qualified U.S. worker responds to the ads and the other recruitment steps that are taken, or maybe a person is qualified but doesn't accept the job under the terms offered, then the Department of Labor can issue the labor certification. If, however, there's even one U.S. worker who is both qualified, that is, meets all of the job requirements, and is willing to accept the job under the terms of employment that have been offered, then the PERM application will be denied and the person will not get his green card or the permanent residence. Now, an example of people who would not qualify as U.S. workers would be people who themselves are on temporary visas, say an H-1B applicant. Sometimes we will get some fabulous resumes in, but when we look at the status of the individual, he or she is on an H-1. And since they're really no farther along than the client or the beneficiary is anyway, they are not considered to be U.S. workers and they need not be considered. Persons who would not be U.S. workers might be consultants. There are many professionals out there who have their own business and they're really not looking for full-time and permanent employment, but they're simply looking for contract work. So they will submit their resumes and say, I would like to handle this job, but as it turns out, they are not seeking employment, but simply they want to work on some projects that they think that might be offered. Sometimes people will have salary demands that exceed what the company is willing to pay. So if a person says, I'm not interested in the position at that salary, or he's not interested in full-time employment and permanent employment with the company directly, then they are basically withdrawing their application and the person could receive the labor certification. Okay. Now, an important point to keep in mind is when resumes are received and reviewed, it's not a comparison of their skill set versus the beneficiary's skill set. The beneficiary is actually removed from consideration. The legal issue is, does any one of those applicants, U.S. workers, meet the job requirements for the position? Again, if they do, if there's even one who is interested in the position, meets all the job requirements, then the labor certification must be denied. Okay. Now, let's look at the steps in the PERM application. The first thing to do when I talk to my clients is, I will have what I call a 3-hour conversation. And we sit down there and we will define what the job is, what the appropriate job title is, job description, job requirements, and that will help us determine what the appropriate applicable minimum salary that has to be offered to the individual. At that point, I would also consider the company's financial ability to pay the offered salary. So if it's a startup company that is not making any income and they cannot offer, say, a $65,000 or $70,000 salary, and maybe the individual is on a part-time H-1 and they're presently making $40,000, the company will not be able to show that it had the financial ability to pay the offered salary or to make up the difference between what they're actually paying him and what the appropriate minimum salary is. So all of those determinations can be made at the very beginning in the conversation with the client to plan the strategy for the labor certification. And again, what I have is what I call a 3-hour conversation. And the reason I call it a 3-hour conversation is typically it takes about 3 hours to explain all of the rules and the procedures, to talk to the client, find out what their background is, to find out what the job entails, what the true minimum requirements are for our advertising. And then from that, we can also determine, we can make a pretty good guess at what the appropriate minimum salary is. Okay. Now, once we have that, then the next step is to actually follow through on the recruitment. And there are certain specified steps that we must follow, or the employer must follow, to attempt to recruit U.S. workers in order to make a determination whether or not there are qualified U.S. workers. Again, if there are, the PERM is denied. If there are not, the company can continue, and the labor certification or the PERM will be issued, and then we will move to stage 2.